Alright guys, this is the last part of the tutorial on the survey for the Japan National Study for the HSC New South Wales certificate. This will be useful for any student looking at the period, but we're going to particularly focus on the social, economic and cultural elements and developments of the period from 1904 to 1921. So in the previous tutorial, we focused on how Japan sought to expand their global power. We focused a little bit on the political elements of this period. And then we also talked about the consequences of World War I for Japan, looking at the Paris Peace Conference and the Washington Naval Pact. So we already spoke a little bit about the industrial kind of development that happens to Japan during World War I. Industrial output rose from 1.4 billion to 6.8 billion yen. They become a major exporter to the Allies, to Britain, France, America. Overseas cotton sales rose 185%. Unemployment decreases, wages rose, and so this all leads to inflationary problems from 1914 and definitely after the war as well, from 1918 through to the 1920s. You can see there that the price of rice increased 174%. This is obviously a staple in the Japanese diet. And so this leads to things like rice riots that we see in 1918. A key development of this period is this new rich. And these new people who really got rich on the militarist spending of Japan during this period. So Japan is evolving into this modern state where we see, the wealthy people really separating themselves from the rest of society because they are becoming really involved in this new manufacturing industry that's really taking off in Japan. And the key leaders of that are these zaibatsu. The zaibatsu are big family companies that form conglomerates, and they begin to kind of expand over Japan, controlling more and more different industries. You can see a lot of names may be familiar to you already. We have the Mitsu Zaibatsu, the Mitsubishi, still in manufacturing today. Another one that you might know is Kawasaki. You can see that this is the first business that they own, all the way back. A lot of them, Mitsu traces its history back to 1673. But by the time we get to this period, they start to control more than 20% of all private capital. And so they really kind of start to really dominate the economic industry in Japan. Most important to recognize is the fact that these, because of their economic power, they also wield political power as well. So again, we see a situation where the elites, the oligarchs, the people who have wealth in society really start to kind of dominate the political sphere of Japan as well. Socially, we have a growing middle class really brought on by this wartime boom, but most importantly as well is because of issues of inflation, we see more and more labor unions. You can see one mentioned here, the Greater Japan Federation of Labor. You can see its leader here, Suzuki Bunji. And it officially declares itself a labor union. In 1918, we have rice riots. In 1919, we have strikes and disputes. And you can see that there are 335,000 working people who are involved in this as well. So this is a time as well where there is social upheaval going on as well. There are new ideas. And so the economic development, the modernization that happens is also having, changing the social fabric of society as well. Importantly, a part of these kind of social developments is the ideological elements that start to be, brought back from overseas and develop within Japan as well. A key member of that is Kida Ikki, who we're going to look at this, and I recommend if you haven't looked at this plan yet, it's very interesting because it really kind of outlines the vision that we see Japan undertaking in the 1930s and in the 1940s. It's called the Outline Plan for the Reorganization of Japan. And whilst he at this time is it is not actioned yet, it kind of, again, I just want you to think about planting the seeds for what we're going to see in the future. We have anarchists calling for freedom, egalitarian society. We have people who are communists. the founding of the Japanese Communist Party. We have labor unions. They go on their first May Day separation. This is the traditional Labor Day celebration. We have the rise of feminism, developing woman-centered feminism, calling for special protection of women due to their role as mothers. So still kind of very much a traditional role, but this idea that we need to be respected in society. So this is the kind of the first seeds of these new ideas like communism, anarchism, militarism, nationalism, feminism that we see, bubbling up in Japan. Because of this, we see, again, cultural developments, coming as well. So the rise of the middle class leads to these department stores, the first time where, Japan can shop in a department store where all the consumer goods, are under one roof. Modern leisure, starts to kind of take place. The salarymen, who, if like Japanese society, they're still kind of a part of that. And their salary is so poor but they live in the city, so they have this kind of the outward appearance of a very lavish lifestyle because they live in the city, they work in the city, but they can't take advantage of anything that the city offers them because their salary is so poor. So that's what it means by that, whose salary is undermined by their social status as a modern city dweller. We have the rise of cinema from Hollywood. This is, part of the Roaring 20s. So we're going to see, jazz, developments, a real liberation of society, taking place as well. This leads to the growth of kind of two different, new kind of people, the Moga and the Mobo. And so the Moga women are those who are, stylish, they're, dressed in Western dress. They're demanding political, economic, and sexual freedom. They're very kind of global minded. They take a lot of their influence from the US and from America. And if you know anything about the 1920s, it gave flapper girls, girls who are very much, freedom orientated. They want, they start to break the bonds that had kind of kept them, in the home. And the traditional kind of views, they now start to kind of broaden their ideas. Men, the Mobo, they start to, be involved in student groups. They become more radical. They start to look at, new ideas from the world around them, things like the Russian Revolution, Marxist-Leninist ideas. So they become involved in these kind of communist groups. And you can see the dress, it kind of really represents this kind of new world kind of thinking that Japan is taking on during the period as well. So Japan is a nation that is undergoing huge amount of economic, cultural, and social change at this period of time. And so James L. McLean in his Modern History really kind of summarizes it very nicely. And this is what I'm going to leave you on. This is the basic summary of the period. We have feisty tenants who are fighting with labor, with their overseas, the people who own the land. So this is tenant farming is still a thing in Japan during this time. We have disgruntled labor in the manufacturing and industry. We have intrepid feminists who are arguing for the end of kind of traditional values, and we have radical students who are getting involved in things like communism, seething minorities and outcasts, the Moga and the Mobo, these new men and women, anarchists, communists. To many within the governing establishment, it appeared that the country was coming apart at the seams. The tumult of the 20s alarmed many bureaucrats and members of the mainstream parties who sought ways to restrain the more extreme forms of radicalism that seemed at times to threaten the very existence of the state. And this is going to be a key element. In the 1920s and further on when we get into the main body of the study, it is really going to be a challenge to try and keep Japanese society functioning and the democracy, which is at the core of the Meiji Restoration, to keep that functioning, because there are so many new ideas and there are so many people who are disgruntled with the system, and because of its failures and because the elites are continuing trying to intervene in the system, they believe that their view is obviously right, so they want to protect their own power. And so in doing that, we see the demise of democracy through the 1920s, ultimately ending in 1932 with the end of the party cabinet. So that is the end of our survey. Hopefully you should be now able to answer those key questions when it comes to how did Japan seek to become a global power, what were the conclusions that happened after the end of World War I, and it's given you a sense of the social, political, economic, and cultural developments that happen in Japan at this period of time. When we come back in the next tutorial, I'll be focusing on Japan in the 1920s, starting in 1922, looking at how this state and how democracy begins to decline and the problems that we see along the way with the party cabinets, the political parties, the influence of the Great Depression, and how this leads to the rise of militarism as we move into the 1930s. So I will see you then.